Okay, I'm going to call to order the regular Board of Education meeting on February 10th, 2021 at 7 p.m. at Hubble Middle School. Mrs. Hutchinson, would you please call the roll?
Here. Here. Here.
Here. Here. Here. I will lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Do any board members have any requested modifications to the agenda tonight? Okay, hearing none. A couple little opening comments. First off, I'd like to start the meeting with a note of thanks to our entire school community, our parents, student, teacher, staff, and leadership team. The Board of Education continues to be thankful that every one of our District 200 schools are open, and we are optimistic about the trends we have been seeing in our community numbers. As we move forward, we are making plans to thoughtfully increase learning opportunities for students during this pandemic, while also continuing to comply with the mitigation strategies established for a safe learning environment for students, teachers, and staff. At tonight's meeting, we will hear 3 oral reports, all connected to student learning. First, we'll hear an update on the timelines and work plans presented at our January 27th Committee of the Whole meeting. As mentioned, these plans are focused on bringing more students back within the guidelines established by the public health experts, while also focusing on year-end experiences for our students. Additionally, our teams are already beginning to think about the next school year. We will also hear an update on social and emotional learning, and a topic we've been focused on for some time now, school connectedness. Our third report will highlight some of the new learning experiences that have emerged during the 2020-2021 school year. First up is public comments, and as I say every month, due to the ongoing pandemic and DuPage County's recent move back to Phase 4 mitigations, which limit the number of individuals in a space at 50, we continue to temporarily amend our public comment procedures to allow comments to be made in person or emailed to the board and acknowledged in this meeting. In accordance with Board Policy 2.230, members of the public wishing to offer comments in person will have the opportunity to do so, but only 35 members of the public will be allowed in the meeting room at a given time due to the number of board members and staff members also in the room. We don't have overflow tonight, but we also made the auditorium available, and as always, the board meeting is available for viewing via live stream on the district's YouTube channel. We do have one person who has signed up for public comment in person. As with all comments, please be aware that it's the board's regular practice not to directly discuss, ask questions, or take action on public comments until the time has been taken to gather adequate information. The board is here to listen. Lack of action or a direct response following public comments does not imply any lack of interest in what is being shared. Per board policy, we've allocated 30 minutes for public comments, and comments on any one subject may be limited to 20 minutes. To preserve confidentiality, the board and its president request that items relating to either personnel or students be provided to the board privately or in writing for consideration in a future closed session, if necessary. The board must protect the civility and decorum of the meeting. Please be respectful for the duties of board, our district leadership team, and the democratic process in your public comment. Please include your name and whether you are a resident of the district. Please limit your comments to 3 minutes. Our Vice President, Mrs. Crabtree, will time the comments and raise her hand when 3-minute mark is up, at which time we ask you to wrap up your comments. Please be factual and courteous and do not include statements that are personally disrespectful or condescending to members of the board or staff. We do have one member signed up, Harold Lonks.
Yes, my name is Harold Lonks, and yes, I am a resident of the district. Good evening. There are a few topics I'd like to talk about tonight. There's a hesitancy with the board with moving forward with the board members stating and reading into record studies from the CDC, etc. Looking at our district numbers, after 4 weeks of saliva testing, Almost 9,000 tests have taken place in 6 schools, and guess what? Only 6 cases were not negative. That's less than 1 student or staff being asymptomatic COVID carrier per week. There was a worry that asymptomatic students and staff could start super spread outbreaks in the school, and that's not the case at all. From the district's website, the number of COVID positive students at the high school was 77. More than half the cases came over a 2-week period in mid-November. The average number of cases reported at the high school is 9.5 cases per week, and if you take out the highest 2 weeks, it would be less than 5. In middle school, it's slightly better than the high school with 7 students per week, and the elementary numbers are 8.5 students per week. These case numbers and percentages don't bear out what's being reported by but for the Wheaton area and DuPage County. The numbers are relatively low considering the size of the student population. May there be a way to educate the Illinois Department of Health or whoever to allow schools to operate under a less restrictive tier, since students are a unique population. The administration also needs to look into Wednesdays like the other days for teacher instruction. If my memory is correct, Wednesdays were originally designed as a cleaning day, and now it's become an extra day, become a day for extra help. Why? If students can alternate every other day in school, the students will have one more direct face time with their teachers to understand course topics and to get help when they're in school. In the course of 2 weeks, students will receive a full day of classroom instruction. I hope we can all agree with this. The administration has been modifying the schedules throughout the year, and now it's time to look at Wednesdays and allow students into the school on those days. It has also come to my attention that the last day for our seniors is Tuesday, May 18th, when graduation is scheduled for May 29th, and high schoolers go until June 10th. The first semester had 29 student days, and the second semester, the students will only have 70 days. The seniors are going to lose about 20% of the instructional time, which is more than double a normal second semester. It seems to me the administration does not have a problem with the lost instructional time. After a discussion with a high school administrator, their hands are tied to state regulations, which are not laws passed by state legislators, legal insurance issues, and a threat of Illinois to stop school funding. Is the state funding threat really being used to keep our students out of the classroom? If legal counsel and insurance carriers will not support or give guidance in opening middle and high schools, they need to come to the next school board meeting and answer the questions students and parents and even teachers have been putting forth since the beginning of the school year. Finally, I was wondering why the high school like Wheaton Academy can have students every day since September. So I called them. They follow the same distancing rules and other guidances. Wheaton Academy repurposed any available space and room into classrooms, including wrestling rooms, band rooms, field house, and so on. The teachers are very supportive of the adjustments in order to allow their students every day into their buildings. One more second. And now we're month 11 into this coronavirus world. Yes, it keeps changing. Our students need to come first by addressing their educational and mental health needs, by allowing to school every day, and participating in sports, school activities, and socializing. Thank you.
Thank you. Community members not attending this meeting in person and who wanted to provide comments to the Board of Education had the opportunity to send an email to the board between the posting of this agenda and 5:00 p.m. today. All board members receive and read these emails. To be acknowledged emails were clearly indicate in the subject line that the email was intended for acknowledgement at the February 10th Board of Education meeting. These emails will be acknowledged but not read and then documented in the board communications log. During this time, we received one email comment from TJ Frey about school reopening. Next up is our superintendent report. Dr. Shula.
Thank you, Mr. Paulson. I do want to just mention, as well as I did last month, that The board does receive regular communication from members of the community. Any email that comes to the board is documented in the communications log that's also attached under board reports. So again, if community members provided feedback to the board, that is also acknowledged in that communications log. We do capture every message that comes across. So just a couple of things I want to share with the board under my report tonight. First, foremost, February is Black History Month, and I've been pleased to have the opportunity to visit a number of our schools over the course of this month. I've had the opportunity to visit with some of our principals, certainly look at some of the communications that have come out from our buildings recognizing Black History Month and contributions that have been made, certainly to history of our community and our country. I do want to mention to the board and to the community as well that we will be at the end of this month at the Committee of the Whole meeting in February, bringing an update to the district's equity plan, which again provides a very important update for the board and some of the steps that District 200 has certainly taken this year to address equity and opportunity for students in District 200. So wanted to mention that certainly at the start. A couple of other things that I want to update for the board and community. Number one, February the 23rd. There is a great opportunity for our community taking place on February the 23rd. Dr. Doug Bolton, who recently did a professional development session for our teachers, very much focused on the topic of resiliency and how it is that we go about building resiliency in our students, in our communities, especially in the time of a pandemic. He'll be doing a similar session for our community, for our parents on February 23rd. Lots of information is available out on our website that is generously supported through the Student Excellence Foundation. So thank you to the Student Excellence Foundation for again partnering with us to bring that opportunity to the community on a very important topic. We continue to make slow but incremental process in our vaccination plans in District 200. We did get a little bit of a crack in the opportunity this week. One of our vaccination partners opened up 200 vaccine spots for staff members, and so again, that's a fraction of our overall staff population, but it certainly is a start, and we're incredibly thankful for that. I do know that a number of our staff members have also had success getting vaccine at one of the other available spots out in the community, either through the county vaccine site or some of the other various opportunities that are available through pharmacies, which we've certainly encouraged. But we continue to work around the clock at really trying to shake loose supply and opportunity for our staff. We've got 4 different partners that we have been working with, trying to do everything we can to make available that vaccine opportunity. So slow but steady progress there. In your green packets, board members, I want to call your attention to a letter that was shared with you by our Virtual Academy teachers at the elementary level, our Virtual Academy leadership team. It's actually just a really nice letter that recognizes and thanks our two Virtual Academy administrators, Danielle Moran and Bob Cerny, for the work that they've done. I think kind of recognized in a letter, and I just want to mention this because I think worth noting that really together, I think they're responsible for one of the largest elementary schools in the state, of 1,200 students that are accessing educational services this year through the Virtual Academy. And really Bob and Danielle and the staff at the Virtual Academy have done an incredible job of really transforming education and opportunity through the Virtual Academy. So I wanted to share that with the board and I guess just recognize that as we move forward from this pandemic year. We've learned a lot through the opportunity to offer a virtual academy, and I think there's some really important lessons that we will be able to continue to draw from. One of those being the next thing that I want to highlight, in that we had our first opportunity to use an emergency remote day in the district. I guess a little over a week ago. We had a water main break in front of Madison Elementary School at the very last minute, a little bit before 7 o'clock in the morning, created conditions that did not make it safe to bring students into Madison that day. And so Dr. Salagi and Mr. Callahan at Madison and I gathered and quickly made the decision to use a remote day in lieu of simply calling school or scheduling a makeup day. And again, it was really a lot of the foundation that was set through the virtual academy that enabled us to be successful in a remote day. Mr. Callahan secured some feedback from parents at the end of the day just to kind of understand the experience. And again, application for this is as we move forward and look at future potential emergency days, snow days, we really wanted to understand what that remote experience would look like or feel like for a school, especially a school that really had been in person through the entire year. And again, it was a successful e-learning day for our family. So thank you to the Madison staff and leadership at Madison for that. Last thing I guess I wanted to mention to the board, in your green folders or on top of your green folders, I did give you just an update on our kind of week over week COVID data. I know that the board has an opportunity to track on our website kind of weekly case numbers, but as we do on the website, we've just been tracking the data kind of week over week. On Tuesday, really looking at numbers of both positive cases, students who are quarantined, students who are out of school for any reason. And again, I think the positive news is that we certainly have seen a leveling off of data from what we saw at its peak, but I think just important to mention that we still do see cases of COVID-19 and the virus in our schools. And so while we're seeing a positive trend in terms of data and information, it is still very much around us, and so that makes it imperative that we continue to operate our programs consistent with our mitigation strategies. That's what's kept students and staff safe in our buildings. I am looking over my list, and I think that's all that I have for my update tonight.
Any questions or comments from board members? Just one clarification. I think I know the water break at Madison, that was outside of the school? That was not in our building?
Correct. It was outside, in front of the building, but it happened to be in front of the building, kind of at the top of the hill, so that all the water flowed straight downhill and just kind of pooled in front of the building. But in order to fix it, they had to shut off water to the area, so we were both without water and had a big mess in front of the school.
Next up is our consent agenda. We have 15 items on our consent agenda. Goes up. Is acceptance of a gift from Lowell Elementary School PTA. Number 2 is acceptance of a gift to the Wheaton North High School Athletic Department football program. Number 3 is acceptance of a gift to Wheaton North High School Athletic Department boys lacrosse program. The next 6 items are all approval to post textbooks. I'll read them off in order. So it's the AP Biology textbook for community review, the Business Law textbook, they're all for community review, the Business Law textbook, CAD 1 and CAD 2 online textbook, the Consumer Education textbook, the Geology textbook, and Sophomore English textbook. Again, all 6 of those are being posted for comment and review, or comment by the community. Item number 10 is approval of statement of completion for the 2020 summer projects. Item number 11 is approval of the Regional Office of Education building permits for the 2021 summer HVAC projects. Number 12 is approval of a lease for one-to-one Chromebooks. Number 13 is approval of bills payable and payroll. Number 14 is approval of minutes from January 13, 2021, open. January 27, 2021, the Committee of the Whole, open meeting. And approval to destroy recordings of closed sessions prior to September 2019 as allowable by law. And finally, number 15 on our consent agenda is approval of personnel report to include employment, resignation, retirement, and leave of absence of administrative, certified, classified, and non-union staff. Are there any of these items that board members want removed from the consent agenda? Any information to share, Dr. Schuler?
No additional information.
Okay. Any questions or comments from the board?
I just have one quick question, probably directed toward Melissa. About how often do we get new textbooks?
At the high school level, there's a system and a procedure, and so every department looks at their textbooks and chooses something new based on different courses on a rotating basis, and so there's a collaboration that happens between both high schools in determining which courses are up and need to be reviewed.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments from board members on these consent agenda items? I guess one question, can you explain the one-to-one Chromebooks again? I think, we spent a lot of money on Chromebooks, but I think these are replacing older ones.
Yeah, Mr. Mack, do you want to answer that one?
Yeah, prior to the pandemic happening and us doing the high school move last year, this was always the planned one. These units are the Dell 3120s, which actually are end of life support in September of 2021. They were always part of the planned refresh because we have to refresh them because they will no longer be supported at the end. There's approximately 5,800 or 5,900 in circulation right now, so this will replace those. We're shuffling them around. Most will go to 7 elementary, and the touch models will go to the middle schools. Again, part of this refresh, along with this coming fall, was supposed to be the initial start of the middle and high school one-to-one. We bumped the high school back to the previous year with the pandemic and the need to do that. So this is just kind of now falling in line as step 2 instead of step 1 to the one-to-one push.
Okay.
At this point, everyone will be one-to-one. We're continuing one-to-one. It's just refreshing a model that's no longer supported.
Okay, thank you. Okay, can I have a motion and a second to approve the consent agenda as presented?
So moved. Second.
Moved by Mrs. Booten, seconded by Mrs. Erickson. Mrs. Hutchinson, will you please call the roll?
Yes.
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 Yes. Yes.
Yes. Okay, the consent agenda has been approved. And next up, we have a policy consent agenda. We have 11 items. These are all items that were posted last month for review and comments, so they're all 11 items are being proposed for approval tonight. And so I'm just going to read off the 11 policies in a little bit in order as they're listed. So first is policy 3.40 for superintendent, policy 4.80 under accounting and audits, policy 4.90 student activity and fiduciary funds, policy 6.20 school year calendar and day, policy 6.300 graduation requirements, policy 6.310 high school credit for non-district experiences, course substitutions, and reentering students. Number 7 is policy 6.320 high school credit for proficiency. Policy, number 8 is policy 6.340 student testing and assessment program. Number 9 is policy 7.100 health, eye, and dental examinations, immunizations, and exclusion of students. Number 10 is policy 7.140 search and seizure. And then number 11 is policy 7.300, extracurricular activities. Again, these are all being asked for approval, and I don't think we received any comments on any of these. Any items board members want to remove from this? Additional information to share, Dr. Schuler?
There is none.
Any questions from board members on these? Okay, can I have a motion and a second to approve the policy posting consent agenda as presented?
Moved.
Moved by Mr. Hanlon,
Second.
seconded by Mrs. Crabtree. Mrs. Hutchinson, would you please call the roll?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Yes.
Yes. So that policy consent agenda has been approved as presented, which moves us into our 3 oral reports that I mentioned earlier. I'm going to first turn it over to Dr. Schuler for an update on our return to learn work plan.
Thank you, Mr. Paulson. So as the board will remember at your last meeting, the January Committee of the Whole meeting, we did provide for the board an update on a return to learn plan. That update included a set of action steps at each of our levels, areas that we were focused on, and really that work for us now kind of falls in 3 kind of big umbrella buckets, right? Efforts that we continue to have in place for this year to expand opportunities for students to access both our in-person and our virtual programs. 2, efforts underway to address any learning loss and to support students that have struggled to connect with our learning programs this year. And 3, efforts to begin planning for next school year. So while we're obviously focused on the immediate, what's in front of us still through the rest of this year, we do recognize, especially at the secondary level, that we're at that point in the year where plans for next year have to be developed, and so we're in the process of doing all 3 of those. So rather than approach the update through a presentation, what we put together for the board is we just captured the work plan identified at the last meeting, and our intent is to give an update on those strategies from the work plan. So I'm going to first let Dr. Sloggy address any updates on the elementary portion of the chart. Dr. Sloggy?
Thank you, Dr. Schuler. Good evening, Board of Education. I'm just going to start from the top and with the most immediate work project that is completed, and that is implementing a trimester 3 learning choice process for our students that wish to transfer from the virtual academy back into the in-person learning environment, or for any students that wish to transfer from our in-person learning environment to the virtual academy. We implemented a process very similar to this during the first trimester as we made the transition to second trimester. Within your packets, you'll see a detailed timeline of our 3rd trimester transfer to in-person timeline. This process kicks off with written communication being sent to all of our families. Our VA families will receive an email from Mrs. Moran, and our in-person families will receive an email from their principal, alerting them of this opportunity to indicate their preference. So you'll see a detailed timeline in there. The 3rd trimester begins March 15th, but we really want to prepare as we go through it, and that's why we start this process now and really start determining placement of students the last week of February and into early March. So while that process is certainly solidified and underway, and we'll follow much of the timeline that we did before, the piece that falls into that as well is that we are underway in evaluating the extension of our in-person learning day for 3rd trimester. Kind of a few pieces that go into this from an administrative perspective. Certainly, we're evaluating what a traditional school day would look like, what barriers would be in place, from staffing to scheduling to different pieces. We also next week start some work with our teacher leaders in this as well. So certainly we're at the evaluation side of this, but I will say that certainly with the in-person learning experience that we have developed, the transition to a full day traditional schedule is not as easy as just flipping a switch and creating a new schedule. There's many implications that we're evaluating, and certainly we want to be thorough in that evaluation. Tied to that, though, I think it's important to note that we are also, and I think that this work with the group that we're using, our leadership group, which is comprised of our administrators and teacher leaders, we also have an eye on ensuring that we establish a full-day in-person elementary learning opportunity for 2021-2022. So I think that work is truly paired together, not only as we look at extending or evaluating the extension of the learning opportunities at third trimester, but the establishment of a full-day in-person learning opportunity. That work starts now for certain. Tied in with all of that, and certainly that's something that is undergoing and can take place this year, as soon as the spring, but also in the summer, is ensuring that we are identifying our students who need to be connected to our schools and need to be prepared for that transition, whether they've been in a virtual environment, whether they have not been in school, or whether maybe they're struggling with some of the different pieces. We have an opportunity to put in connectedness strategies and recovery programming for many of our students. So that work's underway. I think we talked last week about some of the mini grants that our principals are looking at and doing to already. So you can kind of see what's on the plate there for elementary and what's ahead of us.
I think as we go through this, I just want to make sure we can address kind of questions in the immediate. So any questions from board members on the elementary portion of this chart before we move on to middle school?
I have a question. So can you remind us what teacher leaders are, for one thing?
Yeah, certainly part of this group to start. We have some of our union leadership, 4 of our union leaders, that WWEA union leaders, that were part of much of our work, our thorough work in the summer to create our current in-person learning plan, will be a part of that. But we also, as we look at each piece of these, we know that there's also going to need to be other teachers from our buildings giving insight, especially as we talk about learning recovery and some of those pieces. But it's certainly our teachers from our school that are taking a leadership role.
Are we finding a way to solicit input from elementary teachers as a whole? I've been hearing a lot about what's been really working well for them with the model that we have going now. And are we doing any kind of formal survey or anything as to what they like about what's happening now, what they are maybe concerned about if you make any changes to what they've got going, or what kinds of things the teachers who are the ones on the front lines want you to be mindful of if we make any changes?
Yeah. Well, certainly our union put out a formal survey around the midpoint. I want to say maybe it was a month or 2 back on input on the current in-person learning model. They gave that to all pieces. I think the mechanism or the thought around gathering input and feedback from teachers is through our structured approach, right? If we have representation at the table as we're working through this process, ultimately those teacher leaders and our principals are a part of being a voice for their teachers as well. So certainly our principals work with their teachers, and our leadership people that are at the table here from the teacher perspective are working with building representation, teachers at their building, and I think that becomes a feedback mode in itself.
Okay, I guess my question is more, I know that the survey, we saw survey results earlier, and my memory is that was more of a gauge of people's stress levels and how they felt things were going at that point. I'm just wondering about a specific check-in when we're talking about changing the model, not how are you doing now, but if we're considering a change, what kinds of things would you want us to make sure we're considering? Or, I mean, is there a way for them to ask questions or, to follow as you're working on potential plans for changes? I mean, essentially, as opposed to working it out and then letting them know, what the new plan is. Just kind of,
Sure.
I can imagine teachers being anxious if they didn't know what might be changing, because if they don't know what you're considering changing, they don't know what kinds of inputs to give you to say, oh, but make sure you keep this in mind, or, this is really working, or if you're going to make a change, here's something that we're really hoping somebody could address at some point, and maybe now's the time, that kind of stuff.
I can't say at this point that we have a plan for a formal survey. but certainly the feedback of our teachers is important to us, and we certainly want to be mindful of that, and I think that really that's the purpose of involving our teachers at the table in that discussion. So, yeah, I hear your feedback, and certainly am aware of it, and but at this point, I can't say that we have a plan to do a formal survey.
Okay.
Chris, could you comment on how we'll tie or integrate SEL transition programs, other populations into the work plan? It's not
I couldn't
formal.
hear that, I'm
I was
sorry.
just curious.
I don't think Chris could hear that. Can you, a little louder?
Oh, sure. Can you comment on how we'll integrate other learning groups like transition and SEL into the work plan?
Comment on how we integrate other learning groups,
Well,
like,
this addresses elementary, middle, and high school. Then there's other learning groups, other populations that we'll have to think about how we move to this plan. Is that integrated into this? And how will we, what's the context?
yeah, one piece I would say is there is actually a separate special education group that's also forming, that's comprised of our administrators and our teacher leaders as well, you know, along the same format. Not specifically outlined in here, but same processes and same group. Yep.
Chris, can you address, you said earlier that it's not as easy as flipping a switch, and I think for our community to understand maybe some of the complexities, you know, some of the things that are involved with why it's not as easy as flipping a switch?
Sure, thank you for that question. And certainly in initial evaluation, I'll just start with staffing considerations. So as you change from a model that was designed to be sustainable and provide as, really we've taken the majority of our instructional minutes and put them at the front end of the day, or for really what you would consider almost 2/3 to 3/4 of a day are all teacher instructional minutes. And when you make the transition then to a traditional day, this first piece that comes out is staffing considerations. So just in 2 preliminary models that we've looked at, you would be looking at needing to hire anywhere from 75 to 90 lunchroom supervisors, lunchroom playground supervisors, really for the fact that you would be running lunch recess throughout the majority of your day. The other piece too is you would be looking at hiring several specialists, right? So another factor we run, you could be hiring up to 4 PE teachers, and another one we ran, you could be hiring up to 12 PE teachers, again for a short time, but the transition is significant. I think the other piece, and again, what I'll say is it's a barrier when we look at evaluating the extension of it, is the impact of the change in the schedule. So currently, our teachers are teaching the majority of their core content minutes. To change that schedule, it would not necessarily or significantly increase the core content minutes, but it would change when those are delivered, because you would be inserting lunch, recess, and a special into the day, which would have an impact not only on our in-person teachers, but our specialists that are serving both in-person and virtual academy students. So, you know, to be recognized, and as it was recognized earlier, our virtual academies played a significant role in the success of our total elementary plan. Many of our specialists serve students in-person and in virtual academy because we were extremely creative as a team and as a leadership team in staffing both of those models. You would have to restaff and reschedule and even give some consideration to specialists. So I think that those are a few of the things that we want to identify and clearly identify, and certainly that's why we're in the evaluation stage as you look at that transition piece.
So can I just clarify? So right now, the core subject areas are being covered during the day. So it's the areas of our PE, arts, lunch, and recess, for the most part, that make up the balance of the day where students are not present?
And music, yeah, that is correct.
Yes. Thank you.
And one more thing I just want to mention tied to that last point as well, that it's somewhat about resource allocation. It's also about continuity of the resource, right? So, you know, even when you reschedule an entire day, it may also mean that students who have been receiving an intervention through particular reading teacher, through a particular English learner teacher, as that schedule readjusts, there's a potential impact to who's delivering that to. So again, that extension to the full day, right, can present some opportunity, but that can also be a pretty significant disruption if students who are receiving intervention for the last trimester of the year suddenly don't have access to the same reading support, the same support from support from a special educator. Right, and again, it's not that they won't get it, but all of that master, and it just has to be reconfigured.
Any other questions on elementary school?
So you have the plan for transferring to in-person to virtual. Is there the ability of people in person going to virtual?
Yes, if you, essentially the in-person line, here I've laid out the one for in-person. It is the exact same if you want to transfer to the VA, just flip-flop virtual academy with in-person.
Okay,
Yep.
thank you.
You bet.
So I had a question about that specifically, and we've been through this as we did a transition in the second trimester. Can you talk a little bit about that transition process? So you've got a student who's, no matter which way they're moving, leaving one teacher, one set of classmates, going into another school, new teacher, new set of classmates. That's a change, and it's not necessarily a one-to-one transition, so to speak. Can you talk about maybe the process of those teachers? I'm assuming the teachers are communicating and talking about the student experience from where they're coming from versus where they're going to. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, thank you for that question. Certainly our principals and Mrs. Moran worked with our teachers to try and set up communication loops, so there could be some communication between teachers. We will attempt to do that again, and many times those teachers connected. But just on its face in the immediate, it takes a lot of delicate care and time from our teachers, really, to transition that student, because the transition could come with many challenges. Many times, the student may not be up to speed with some of the executive functioning pieces that are happening within the classroom, which are just basic school functions that they have been out of for a little bit. So extending time, you add the layer of all of our mitigations that are in place, which are not traditional schooling. So certainly it's just taking time, spending time, and that is why, truthfully, we try to give time even for our teachers to prepare for this transition, which is why we lay it out almost a month and a half ahead. And I think the same can be said for the transition back into the virtual academy, the digital tools, those pieces into it. So really it's just about being aware of who's coming, being very diligent, trying to connect those teachers to talk, and then our teachers who I think are the best in the world are being diligent and empathetic to that situation and working to transition the student.
So I guess the point of all that is that it's not as simple as just moving a name from one location to another location. It's a very complicated process to make sure that that student is successful in the new location.
Correct.
Yeah.
I have a question about the timeline, too. If I'm reading this correctly, it looks like parents that want to make a change need to make a choice before they really know what the third trimester might look like? Am I reading that right?
Yeah, I think part of our, as I spoke last week, we are evaluating the extension of the in-person learning day, and I think we want to be open about that evaluation. But certainly, no determinations or decisions have been made. Right now, it is an evaluation piece. So knowing that that is under evaluation certainly is what we're communicating to our families right now as they think about that trimester transition. But we certainly encourage any families that are seriously considering that and have questions to either reach out to their principal or they can reach out to me directly.
So if there were families that were considering a change, you're hoping they'll know that at least there's a possibility that there will be changes, so that if they have questions about that, they can do those individually?
Yes.
Okay.
I guess one more question for me is, we talk about this evaluating the extension of the in-person learning day. We've talked about that from going where we are to the traditional day. Have we evaluated maybe just extending the day from 4 hours to, say, 4.5 hours or something. Just, I don't know if that would be equally complex, but on the surface, it sounds maybe a little bit less of a complicated transition.
Yeah, I think that's a big piece as to why we have that leadership group together, to really fully evaluate all of those possibilities in the potential in all those pieces. So while you start with the evaluation of the traditional school day, certainly evaluating the extension of the day needs to happen at multiple layers.
Okay. Any other questions before we move over to the middle schools? All right.
Good evening. I will be providing an update relative to the middle school work plan. So when you review that work plan, there are 8 tasks laid out. We have 2 that are already completed. So we have resumed extracurricular opportunities at the middle school, and we have begun the concurrent teaching at the start of the semester. Next week, we'll actually have another item that will move from green, underway, to blue, completed, and that will be beginning to use a revised structure for staff and students for the remote Wednesday. And so at our last board meeting, we did start this conversation. And if you recall, there were 3 items that I highlighted that were being discussed with the middle school leadership team with regards to Wednesdays. The first being that we believe our middle school students need a structure so that they can have high attendance and engagement in this environment. Second, the hybrid schedule does present us with challenges to provide individual needs to our students. And then third, we do need to recognize the needs of our teachers in planning for the concurrent teaching and the work it takes to provide high-quality learning experiences. And so inside your green packets, you will see the updated information that our teacher teams have developed with regards to our Wednesdays. And you will see there that we will be utilizing our remote bell schedule, and we will be following that 25-minute period. So the idea here is students will be checking in for attendance purposes, and teachers will be providing announcements and also an overview of the learning activities. The day will also be structured in a manner so that our teachers will be using the time flexibly. So that may mean there will be a whole group lesson, small group lesson, or individual opportunities to work with students. And this will actually begin starting next week. I'd also like to highlight the item on the work plan that is about evaluating, I'm going to read it right here. I apologize. Evaluating and expanding the number of students that are attending 4 or 5 days a week at our middle school. And so that our principals are diligently working on that right now. And I do want to emphasize a couple of hurdles that exist at the middle school with regards to this area. First and foremost, you may remember that our middle school hybrid enrollment is the highest for our 3 levels. And so we also have to keep in mind our building space and the different sizes at our 4 middle schools. They do vary greatly in size. And so that also presents us with some challenges for the number of open classrooms that our middle schools have. And those are very important to the plan because we do need spaces where students can go if they can't attend every one of their classes. So when we talk about those open classrooms, it's almost like an overflow space where if they're able to attend 6 of their 8 classes, they may have to go to this overflow space for 2 of their classes. So that's critically important to the plan with regards to the number of open classrooms each of our buildings have. But we are diligently working on that, expanding the number of students coming each week, and really focusing in on identified, targeted students that need to be in our buildings as often as possible. And our grade level teams have criteria they've established for selecting those students. Lastly, I think it's very important to emphasize here on our plan as well for board and community that we are working to establish a 5-day-a-week in-person middle school learning opportunity for next school year.
All right. Any questions or comments on the middle school program from board members?
I just want to say I'm very excited about Wednesdays becoming a teaching day for middle school students. As a parent to a 7th grader, I think it's a huge opportunity for them and really important. So I greatly appreciate the work that's been put into this to make that day happen for both the students and the staff, and I just really appreciate it, and I think is a great step forward as we continue to move our entire plan forward. So thank you for the work.
Yeah, the comment about the different buildings, I mean, I realize it, but I just didn't really appreciate it, I guess, the difference between, say, for example, Hubble, a newer building, versus the one that keeps coming to my mind is Franklin, which has substantially different spaces, different space sizes, and as we try to bring more kids back, you know, it's not necessarily the same solution, right? We still have different challenges we have to work through individually within each building, which again just reinforces how complicated all of this is, you know, in levels that you didn't really anticipate until you really go through it. So yeah, I appreciate it, all the changes being made, and any feedback from teachers on the transition to the concurrent instruction.
Yes, we have received feedback. I've heard feedback through our principals, and we did have many teachers that did start the concurrent teaching when students returned, and so they've been trying lots of different methods of what that could look like. And so those teachers, I think, are hitting a groove right now, while our teachers who started February 1st, they're still trying lots of methods in terms of really figuring out what is the best way it'll work. Just a reminder as well for the board, it's really individualized depending on your content and your subject area and your daily objectives. And so they're definitely creative in how they are implementing, but overall, the feedback I have received is that it's nice to connect with students every day.
Go ahead.
Just one quick thing I just thought of is, how is the lunch situation going to happen with more students in the building?
Great question, and that's a piece that we are continuing to have conversations with. And for a reminder for everyone, the requirement is only to have 50 in a space for the lunchroom. And so each of our middle schools have 3 spaces for lunch right now, and so they have to. This is the complications and all of the logistics that go into this work. And so every time they add a student, they need to look at the lunch availability on each day to ensure that there is a space for those students without exceeding the 50 room capacity.
Any other comments? I have one more point I want to really make. I guess, you know, I think the one thing that's unique about our middle school program, and even our high school program, as you look at all the other school districts that we read about and hear about and talk to, you know, our middle school and high school day, these are full traditional days. I mean, we're not compressed into a block schedule, you know, half days, changing the class periods. Our kids are still experiencing 4 days a week, 2 in person, 2 remote, a full day of instruction just like they normally would. And I do believe, based on everybody I talked to, that that's unique. And I think our staff and teachers should be celebrated for that and recognize that that is a big success that I think needs to be accomplished or recognized. So thanks everybody, including the teachers who I'm sure are listening, to realize that we are doing something that a lot of other school districts are not.
I do have a question, Brad. I have a question. Do we have any planning in place for going to back for 4 days or 5 days for everybody?
For next school year? Or
No, for this school year.
For this school
Should
year?
I know the 50 room capacity for lunch is an issue. I know the 6 foot social distancing is an issue, but should that be relaxed? Would we be looking at going back?
Yeah, and I guess I'll mention both middle and high school, that if that big kind of hurdle or impediment changes, right, the physical distancing definition and the associated elements with it, right, contact tracing and quarantine guidance, the benefit of our middle school and high school program is that that's an easy adjustment, right? There's no, unlike the conversation Dr. Sloggy just had about the transition at the elementary level, that's really about reprogramming the day. At the middle and the high school, if the physical distancing requirement is adjusted, there's not a major adjustment to the program. That's just about kids coming in on each of the days. So yes is a short answer to that. We would have a very easy plan to transition if that were an adjustment that would need to be made, because it does not involve significant reprogramming of the day. I guess the assumption would be that some of a number of students you could have in a space for lunch purposes would also have to be adjusted if some of the distancing pieces would, but again, Melissa, Charlie, tell me if there's anything else to that. That's a pretty easy transition if that happens.
Absolutely. When we worked on it in the summer, both plans had hopeful thinking that at some point those restrictions would end, and if that happens, you just bring them together, hybrid A and hybrid B.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, ready for high school?
All right, thank you, Board of Education. I appreciate the opportunity to update you on what we're doing at the high school level. I'd be remiss not to thank people like Julie Ozumkowski, the assistant principals at the high school, and we have a high school reopening team made up of 27 teachers, department chairs, administrators, all meeting and trying to solve one of the biggest issues that we're looking at right now, is really how do we get as many kids in 4 days a week that need to be there and also want to be there. So if you look at this timeline, a lot of these things we have completed since the last time we met, and a lot of our energy is focused on getting kids in that want to be there. So the data tool is actually pretty incredible. If you think of a high school schedule, we have a tool with each teacher, each class, how much room they have, hybrid A, hybrid B, how many kids can we add. Once we add them, it updates. So that tool was completed with Julie Ozumkowski and a couple of assistant principals, so we're really at the point where we could start doing this. We're also assessing, just like Melissa Murphy shared, when we bring more students in 4 days a week, we need to make sure we have every space in places in lunchrooms so that we could stay within that 50 to a lunchroom. So we're looking at also the students that may not have every class in person. We also need a location for 50 students and a supervisor to be with those students when that class is going on. So we've already done that. We've identified at both high schools areas that we can do to bring students in 4 days a week. And then also, we did the attendance policy, and depending on the hybrid, we've seen a growth of 125 to 140 more students second semester showing up than we did first semester. That's a positive. The negative, but I think it's a positive too, is about 20 to 30 families have said, we're going e-learning. The positive of that is we can now have more room for the kids that need and the kids that want to be there. So the attendance policy is working. Teachers are working hard, contacting kids, trying to see if they want to come to school and will come to school. Deans are working hard as well on that. We had a form for parents, and it went out to parents. Any parent that did sign up for second semester in-person hybrid got a form that they could fill out, and I think it's due on the 12th, asking them if their child would like to, if there's an opportunity, be in school 4 days a week. So that form's out. We're already identifying needs-based students through problem-solving teams, through data, through grades, through conversations with department chairs. There's a lot of different people working together on that. And then we're already in the process right now, we started on the 5th, of identifying needs-based students to come in person, and we want to finalize by the 19th. We're already ahead of schedule there. And then the wants-based, we're starting with seniors, and we're going to have seniors have first dibs, and then it's juniors, then sophomores, and if we need to, freshmen as well. Our goal is to really make sure that we have as many spaces filled as we can at the high school to make sure students could get in 4 days a week. Just like Mrs. Murphy said, we did start extracurricular activities. I will share that Mr. Biskin and Scott McDermott both said that this past weekend were their favorite weekends that they've had all year because they got to see a number of different activities and sports go. And so those started, and we've got kids doing that, which is great. We also have a document that basically takes our COVID data and can also track the kids that are in extracurricular activities. With so many activities and so many sports, we need to make sure if somebody does have a COVID case, not only do the teachers know, but if you're a coach and an activity sponsor. So we have that as well. I will share the next committee was probably my favorite committee meeting. We do recognize that the class of 2021 has had a difficult school year. We all know last year with the class of 2020, we did a lot of things to make sure that they were recognized. We want to do the same thing for the class of 2021. So we met last Wednesday with a number of parents and senior class representatives from both high schools, as well as the class sponsors, the activities directors, and the principals, and the superintendent of schools. So really what we're focusing with that group, we're going to meet every other Wednesday, and our focus is how do we make sure we recognize and give opportunities for the class of 2021 to have some activities before they graduate. So that's the focus of that committee. It was a great meeting. It was great to get feedback from the students. Of course, they were nervous about what we're going to do. They're happy, I think, that we have a committee, and we want to make sure that we recognize them. So that's a committee we just started. The committee's been created, but we're going to meet every 2 weeks. Next is planning and addressing the learning recovery needs of students. This will start in the spring. It'll start at one of the, also we could use things like Saturday school, summer, and next fall. We do understand that that'll be a topic coming up at the next CAL meeting, so I won't go into too much detail. But I will tell you, we've met 13 times with the high school reopening committee. Our next focus, our biggest focus is going to be start to talk about next year, the 5 days a week in-person learning environment, because that is our target. So just like Dr. Salagi said and Melissa Murphy said, we do have a committee that will start the focus on how are we going to bring kids back next year. So those are the things that we've been working on at high school. And like I said, again, thank you to the Board of Education for your support. And I can't thank the deans, the administrators, the teachers, and the department chairs for all of their hard work, because our goal is really to get as many kids in 4 days a week as we can.
All right. Board members, questions, comments?
I have a comment to make, and it's, you know, to the whole board itself too. So I had an opportunity, a high school teacher reached out to me and said, I'd like to talk to you about Wednesdays and what my Wednesdays look like. And so one thing to remind everybody is we don't have virtual academy at the high school. So as she described to me, her Wednesdays are checking in with all the students that she never sees during the week, the students that are completely remote. She meets all day long on Wednesdays with students. And so that was, you know, something that I hadn't thought about myself, is the students that are not part of our hybrid still need an opportunity to have check-ins one-on-one, and that with teachers as well, or even in small groups. And so I think that's an important part for us to be thinking about, is that how are those, I know we had public comment tonight about those Wednesdays, and can we bring all, bring our, rotate hybrid or that. We do have to think about our students too, that are fully remote, and maybe that's their only opportunity to have some form of connection and that with students. So, we just need to keep that in mind as we're thinking about what to do on Wednesday. So I just wanted to make that comment, that I appreciated that information being shared with me.
And we're a little bit behind the middle school with that because we're focusing so much on getting students in 4 days a week. But we did start the conversation on those Wednesdays, and that was one of the biggest things that I learned through this, is how much work the teachers have spent trying to connect with students. And one of the things we looked at last year was October. We had 3 times the amount of D's and F's of a normal school year, but we came in at the end of first semester right at or below the amount of D's or F's pre-pandemic. So we know we've utilized that to target students and help them, but we also know, as we talk to our teacher leadership group, that there's probably some things and some communication that we could do for parents to tell them what they could do if their child needs help on those days. So we are working on that. I just don't have a final resolution, but Chris, you are right. The teachers on this committee will say they meet with kids almost all day, trying to make sure that they're connected, and the e-learning piece is the piece that maybe the high school and elementary doesn't have, where we have the e-learners, we have hybrid A, hybrid B, live streaming all going together. We just don't have a virtual academy. So those kids are never in the building. So that is, Chris, thank you for bringing that up. That's a piece I missed on the presentation.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, I kind of knew that, but I didn't connect the dots. I'm sure that we're going to hear when members of the community look at the proposed schedule for the hybrid students on Wednesday, they're going to say, well, why not high school? But it's a very different situation than we have at the middle school. So thanks for pointing that out. Any other questions or comments on that?
Just, I think really good work. I really like this kind of segregation of this in the 3 levels, but just shows how much effort and thought has gone into it. I'm really proud of being part of this district and this board and working with you guys, because I do think we are far ahead. We hear about Wheaton Academy, but we don't hear about how many fewer people they have. And I mean, if you look at their square foot per head, it's much larger than any of our schools, so it's really apples and oranges. I know we're hearing about Elmhurst, where they're going to go to 5 days, but they're also doing mandatory COVID testing, which is something that probably would cause some concern. I like analogies, and I think some of the one of the analogies that I think of with people upset about us not opening is it's like us being mad at the Chicago Bulls because we can't go watch a basketball game. People are mad at us because we don't have all the kids in school 5 days a week. We can't. And I know nobody wants to hear that, and everybody, there's people that think just go to 3 feet and that's it. I think we're doing it right. I think it's been thoughtful. I see us continuing to push and be ready as it's allowed, so I think we should all be proud of what's happened all year. So thank you.
Yeah, I'll add to your point about Wheaton Academy, a private school where many of our people in our community attend to. There's also 2 other Catholic high schools in close proximity to us that are also in a hybrid model. So, there's examples all the way around. Every, as Dr. Schuler said from the very beginning of this whole thing, every school has a unique situation that makes their solution either possible or not possible. So it's just kind of a recurring theme that you can't just go make blanket statements about like everybody else does. Like go look at like what the other schools are doing, because they're not all the same. So thanks for pointing out Wheaton Academy again. Okay.
I just wanted to make a comment too. I just kind of in line with Dave, that I just wanted to say thank you to Dr. Schuler and our team for being so forward-thinking about this. You can see at all 3 levels that we are looking at establishing a 5-day week in-person model for the next school year. We're starting now to think about that. We understand that COVID's going to be with us for a little while in some form, and hopefully we can, as the vaccine gets more rolled out and we can maybe relax some of the guidelines, that we can get there a little sooner, but there's a chance that we could still be in this situation come fall, and we're starting now and we're going to figure it out. And, having been on the reopening committee in the summer, I saw how hard these teams are working and how collaboratively you're working, and that they're very productive conversations, and people are on the team from all across the district at different levels are able to voice their concerns, voice their opinions, and they're heard and they're discussed. And I just want to say thank you for that we're starting now, that we're going to, we're saying to our community, we're going to figure this out. And I just wanted to say that too, I should have said it earlier at the elementary level, that, if we were, I think, one of the, if not the only schools in Northern Illinois to have our elementary in 5 days a week from the very beginning. And we were a leader in that front, and many other districts came to talk to Dr. Schuler, to tour what we are doing there. And now that we're exploring, as we brought up last meeting, a full day, while we may or may not be able to implement that, I think it shows that we're trying to stay on the forefront of thinking through these difficult issues with our staff, keeping our students, as I said, at the top of the mountain. That's what we're, trying to serve here. And I just want to overall thank the senior leadership team and Dr. Schuler for your leadership in this area, and to keep, every meeting we've come, you keep pushing through the next hurdle and saying, this is what we're working on, this is how we're going to get there. And I feel that you keep delivering on that. And I just, as a board member and as a parent of 2 kids in the district, I greatly appreciate that and those efforts. And I just wanted to say that, so thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Susan. Just kind of in closing, one thing that I'll mention is we keep hearing over the national news the last couple of days that the CDC apparently is going to be coming out with updated guidance around safe reopening of schools, so that would be one thing to watch for, and I can't anticipate they're going to say much different than what we're already doing to provide the mitigations necessary, but if there are changes, I'm sure that would then, kind of domino effect into the Illinois Department of Public Health and the State Board of Education, then down to the DuPage County Health Department. So that's one thing we can be optimistic about, hopefully, which might trigger a lot of the things that we want to be able to do.
Can I just ask one quick question? Because I think this has come up before in emails that we've received. Should there be a big change that happens in, say, 6 feet, 3 feet, we do not have to wait to the next board meeting to make a decision. Am I correct in saying that? You can make that decision at any time.
Correct. I think, again, what I just want to continue to be clear on that. I think the direction and the feedback of the board is that as long as we are operating inside of the mitigations that we laid out for the board and for the community as a part of our original reopening plan, we have the okay of the board to continue to bring as many students back as we can. So I would come back to the board seeking board approval only if we were making a significant adjustment to one of those mitigation efforts, right? So I would not be comfortable simply dropping from 6 to 3 feet without the board understanding we were making a significant change like that. But again, to your point, if the guidance is updated and that comes out clearly from CDC, IDPH, and our local health providers, we've made adjustments as some of those pieces have been relaxed. We did that in the activity space. As those opportunities became available, we certainly resumed those opportunities as quickly as possible for our students, and that's kind of the pace in which we've operated. So, there's a thoughtful process that we're using to ensure that the students we're bringing back, that we can do that safely, but there is also an Operation Warp Speed mentality to this, to get this done as soon as possible to get students into our buildings.
All right, so thanks, Dr. Schuler and team for this. Appreciate the update, appreciate the timeline, a lot to be thankful and optimistic about as we move forward. Next up, for our second oral report is our social and emotional learning update.
Dr. Salagi is back with emotional learning update. We've not done this in a couple of board meetings, but wanted to bring this back and make sure that we highlighted both a social emotional feature development within the district and a student learning or teaching and learning feature. So, Augie?
Thank you, Dr. Schuler, and you can't see, but I have a smile on underneath my mask, because if you remember pre-pandemic, I would give a social emotional learning feature at every one of our meetings for about the past 2 years, and then that stopped, and we're back at it, and I'm really excited to do that, and want to thank the board for asking for these updates again. I know that there's a strong focus on the social and emotional needs of our kids, and we need it more than ever now. Today it's fitting, I'm actually going to highlight first of all, just the school efforts of the school that we're in right now, Hubble Middle School. So I'm certain Mr. Pilkington and Mr. Vondren, who have hosted us bi-weekly for the past year almost, could speak to this just as well as I am, if not much better. But Hubble, like many of our schools, has continued their strategic efforts around school connectedness, specifically student-teacher relationships. And specifically, though, they've adapted their school connectedness efforts to target students that were struggling academically. So in the fall, they utilized grades and learning data to identify students in need of a deeper connection to school. And their goal in this endeavor was to use a teacher-student relationship really to improve learning and to get kids more engaged. And each Hubble staff member actually identified a student, adopted a husky, if you will, really on a focus to meet with that student regularly, to connect with them, to take a personal interest in them, and to try and form an authentic relationship. Now, as they identified the students, they certainly had their staff members say, like, hey, I know that student. I already gotten in with that student. They have not fully evaluated the program yet, but they have seen some initial success stories for students. So I wanted to highlight that because it was just a really intentional effort, one of many that are happening at our schools, and an example of things that you see amongst all of our schools. It also pairs nicely with the fact that last couple weeks ago I started talking about the school connectedness efforts that we've set as a foundation in our SEL framework. But our secondary teams actually reconvened all of their relationship teams, the folks that were trained a year and a half ago on the trauma-informed practices and all the school connectedness efforts. And underway right now, those teams are actually asking those key questions that we've identified, right? How do we make sure every kid has a positive relationship and is connected to an adult in our school? And then how do we respond to kids that are not connected? So the positive of this is, while the pandemic adjusted our timeline on some of our strategic processes or actions around school connectedness, because we had a framework established, a focus on relationships, and put time into training, our schools actually have structures that when we want to reinitiate work, we can get right back into that structure, which is really a teacher leadership structure, and we can initiate actions. So we're excited about that work strategically beginning again, but as I also want to mention, that work has been ongoing already authentically, as you see by the Hubble example.
Thank you, Dr. Salagi. Any questions, comments? Yes, I have one comment, and that is, can you talk a little bit about how this is working at the VA level? And what does student school connectedness mean, at that level when you're not seeing somebody in the...
Sure, yeah. A few things. One, I can speak to the elementary level at the VA piece is that it's not only we see it as not only the virtual academy and the teacher's responsibility, but still that student's attached to a school, right? They're attached to a home school. So actually Mrs. Murphy and Mrs. Moran and their team identified students that weren't connected and asked our principals to develop specific game plans around reconnecting those students, whether it's hitting the phones, trying to get them into the building, all different strategies and mini grants came through around how we do that. So we're certainly already attuned to who's not connected. And then I want to say on the flip side, a lot of our kids really are connected. We do hear a lot of success stories around the Virtual Academy working very well for our students, and our teachers have had to work extraordinarily hard in the Virtual Academy to connect with students because they're not physically in person with them. So I think we see both sides of it, but the vigilance and the awareness stays the same. For our students that are strictly online, not in a Virtual Academy, but are just online and not attending or coming to school, I think that this process applies right to it. Like those would be students that we would still be identifying. Even when I give the Hubble example, those could have been in person or students that are choosing virtual.
And Brad, just one thing I'll add to that, just in talking with Mrs. Moran, Mr. Cerny today, actually some of the relationships that are developing through the Virtual Academy are very deep in terms of that teacher-student connection, and I think part of that is that there is a benefit to a different use of time throughout the day, and the flexible use of time that actually does allow for more like individual student-teacher contact time, right? So the reality of schedule in Virtual Academy is that students are not necessarily on like group screen the entire time based on the reality of that, and so that's created some different opportunities for relationship, and not to steal something that may be later under a board report, but Mr. Hanlon and Mrs. Crabtree and I had a chance as part of a building visit to an elementary school last week to actually observe an elementary Virtual Academy class, and you can see the relationships, right? In that Virtual Academy experience, you can actually tangibly see the level of connection and relationship. So how everybody's done it, I can't necessarily speak to, but it's very authentic and you can see it.
All right, any other questions or comments before we go to the third oral report? All right, student learning feature.
Thank you. Just like Dr. Salagi, it's very nice to return to talking about student learning in District 200. And so the report I prepared for you tonight that's in your green folder does outline some very specific examples of the wonderful learning experiences that this environment has provided us. We won't deny the pandemic has resulted in significant disruptions to our educational system, and it's required our staff to navigate and our students to navigate a totally new learning environment. There have definitely been challenges, but there have been opportunities that have presented themselves based on this new learning environment, and specifically, it's given us an opportunity to advance our fit learning environment, and specifically tonight I'm going to speak to creation and collaboration. So at Wheaton Warrenville South, the students in our vocational program are always working on new projects and collaborating with one another, but one of their newest projects that they are working on right now is timely to the environment we're in. They're creating tiger face masks that they're selling. And so that's certainly an opportunity that has presented itself and is creative on their part. In 8th grade, our digital authorship classroom has gone and shifted their traditional research project, and now they have been interviewing experts through Zoom, and they've also changed that report to be either a podcast or a TED Talk. Our Virtual Academy science teachers have certainly had to be creative around science labs. And so I had a very tangible example for you of what that lab experience can look like and the creativity of our teachers in making this come alive. So in one of our classrooms, they were studying about density, and the teacher gave 3 different activities, and students had the opportunity to choose 2. So they could follow along on a video demonstration and calculate the density of various liquids in the jar, or they could predict the densities of household liquids and test their predictions. Or third, which is my personal favorite, is they could have completed an interactive virtual escape room focused on the concept of density. So definitely some creativity in that space. Fine arts, they have continued to support our students in this new learning environment in many different ways. Our band and orchestra students utilized a program called Soundtrack. It's a recording software program, and they created a virtual concert. So every student recorded their part during remote learning, and then we utilized that software to bring all of those parts together and mix the tracks to create one song. At our high schools, the idea of allowing our students to collaborate that are in two different learning spaces has been a focus. And so our teachers have really worked hard to figure a way for those virtual-only students and our hybrid students to be able to connect and collaborate with one another. And so the staff have integrated a wide variety of tools, from Flipgrid, WeVideo, Google Apps for Education, breakout rooms and Zoom and Meets, and that has all been done intentionally to connect those two groups of students. Additionally, I do need to recognize the efforts of our staff to continue to provide high-quality professional learning for our teachers, and that has been designed to support our staff in optimizing group dynamics no matter the environment. And lastly, talking once again about our elementary virtual academy, we do need to celebrate how they have transformed their methods and strategies for our youngest learners in this environment, and most certainly to celebrate the technology skills that have developed with our very youngest learners in our district. And they are specifically using tools each day to allow our students to collaborate with one another and publish their work in new ways. So one such assignment I want to showcase for you, a second grade classroom. The teacher had the students do an animal research project. They posted their work on a Google site so all of the students could see each other's work. But this went beyond just the traditional Google slideshow. They really were using a lot of tools. They were recording their voice, creating videos, and using the voice-to-text feature, even adding sound to music to enhance their research project. So definitely many things to celebrate that have come out of this learning environment.
Thank you. Any comments or questions from board members on this? I would just say it's exciting to hear all those stories, as I would think it was a few meetings ago, we made the statement about how we knew that at the end of this, something positive was going to come out of this, that was going to change how we might approach individual activities or opportunities going forward. So it's great to hear that, and I only can imagine how these second grade students have become so much more comfortable with Zoom and living and working in a virtual world, that they wouldn't have had the opportunity to until maybe, middle school. So it's exciting to hear this, and it's exciting to imagine what could be something that sticks around for the next, 10, 20 years. So thank you for that, and just kind of overall, thank you for all the teachers that are working through this and searching out new ways to do something that they've done throughout their careers, and accepting the challenge and working through all the hurdles and still making it a positive experience for our students. So thank you. Okay, so that's the end of our 3 oral reports. Thank you for everybody and that wonderful update for the board. We do not have any discussion items tonight. We do have 4 written reports, as we always do, that were attached to our agenda. The first was the monthly financial report. The second was the Freedom of Information Act report. Third was the board communication log. Again, that is just a memorialization of all the emails that come to the board. And then fourth is I should say memorialization, is just the name and the topic and the date. The contents of those are not listed on the log. And then the fourth written report is the Citizens Advisory Committee report for the 2 meetings ago that they approved their minutes. Then I believe we have the next CAC meeting next Wednesday, is that correct? And so these reports are provided for information only. Any questions from board members on those 4 reports? Next up is reports from board members. We do not have any committee reports attached to this. Any quick comments to make from, go ahead,
I
Jenna.
do. I had the opportunity to attend by Zoom the Student Excellence Foundation board meeting in January. And I just wanted to report that continues to be a very robust group that's doing all sorts of things to support us that nobody sees because we're all kind of in hiding this year. But I think you're all aware that they jumped into action at the beginning of our whole COVID experience with the Food Insecurity Fund for the district. And we had overwhelming support from the community with contributions coming into that. They've kind of folded their Food Insecurity Fund into what they are now calling the Essential Needs Fund. So that includes food insecurity. So they're collecting donations along for food insecurity, for winter weather gear that sometimes kids would get at school with donations, and also learning enhancements that kids need. They were also discussing at their board meeting bringing back their grants to teachers for the spring cycle. They had suspended that in the fall in honor of continuing on with their Essential Needs Fund, and they are going forward with their grant cycle, so they will be taking grant applications from teachers and awarding those grants in the spring for use next fall, first semester. And I was just looking at their deadlines. They have a deadline of, I believe it's February 17th, so right around the corner for teachers. Or no, did I get that right? I'm sorry. March 5th is for the teachers submitting grant requests. They have another program that they've been starting up because they want to encourage the teachers for their extraordinary efforts they've been putting on this year. And so they have something called Stars of the Week. And so they're allowing people in the community to go on their website at studentexcellencefoundation.org to nominate classroom teachers and staff members in each building for ways that they've been adapting to the environment and inspiring people. So that is where their deadline, I believe, is February 17th, and you can go in, and starting in mid-March through the end of the school year, they're going to be recognizing one teacher and one staff member from each building each week. And they'll be celebrating them on various social media platforms, and I think recognizing them at their end of the year Distinguished Teacher Celebration, which will be, I think it's planned to be virtual again this year. So they'll also have their yearly Distinguished Teacher Awards that you can go onto their website and nominate people for that as well. So they're continuing to do a lot of things to try and support what they know we need at this time and in this environment. So that was, and they also continue to put on mobile food pantries. They did one in January, they just did one in February last week. So they've been supporting the community that way too, in partnership with the Northern Illinois Food Bank. So just amazing efforts from that group. And I just wanted to say I had the opportunity also to have a quick check-in with Debbie Klein, our principal at Emerson, last week, and it was great to see her, and it was just clear that she's very proud of both her staff and her students for the way they've been adapting to this learning environment this year. And she said, there have been a lot of positives that have come out of it. The teachers have, by now are in their groove. They have, they've just become very efficient at what they need to do in the 4 hours they have with their students, and the kids have been, following along, doing everything that they're asked to do. Very little conflict in the classrooms or in the school, and so overall she just seemed very happy about what was going on, and so it was really nice to hear. So those are my two reports.
Any other board members?
Yeah, just real quick, as Jeff referenced, Chris and I, Jeff, were over at Sandburg. So now we've been able to go to North Monroe and Sandburg. And to see those elementary school kids perform and do what they're doing, it's hard to communicate just how amazing it is. Mm-hmm. Now, I'm not ignorant of all the challenges we have, and I don't want to just, ignore that, because there's a lot of tough things going on. But I think it's also important to take time to recognize all the special things that are going on as well. And Jeff has mentioned the connectedness in, what we saw in the virtual academy, but a few things we saw. One was, we saw, I think it was a second grade, maybe even a first grade class. It was the time to wash the hands. And so they were coming out one by one or two by two, standing on their dots, going to wash their hands, going back in the room. It was just like perfectly orchestrated. There was no goofing around. There was no, it was incredible. And they were happy, energetic. It was great. We saw a couple of older classes, fourth grade, fifth grade. Most of the kids have their laptops open in the class while they're working. It's an amazing thing to see. Teachers are just so agile, and they use the tools that are available to them and make it work. We took time and saw, as Jeff referenced, the virtual academy session, and I'd say in addition to the connectedness and just how the kids are engaged. So we jumped in, our camera was on, so it was, 3 strangers with their masks on, right, 3 adults, which is not a common thing, and they just waved hi, we waved hi, and they went about doing what they did. They weren't afraid to talk, they weren't afraid to contribute. Teacher was pulling kids in. It was really amazing. And so, these I'll call them unintended benefits, and while I don't want that to totally sweep under all the challenges we see, I think it's important to really recognize those unintended benefits and how they will serve us in the future. It's not a one-time deal now. These things are going to serve us and serve these kids well into the future. The next kind of trip we're going to take, we want to go back and see some middle schools, because when we visited, high schools. When we visited North, they were preparing for streaming. And so we want to see what that looks like now when it's in action. So we're going to head back out and do that. So I've loved these trips. They've been great to get out, get in the schools, see what's going on, real time, the reality of education in our buildings. It's been fantastic. So, Chris, do you have anything?
Yeah, it was interesting to see. We went into I believe it was a 5th grade classroom, and you think, okay, kids are facing forward, their teachers lecturing them, and that wasn't the case. They were meeting in pairs, I believe it was, maybe threesomes, doing some book talks, and it was almost like being back in a classroom again. As you saw the collaboration that was happening in there. A teacher actually stepped out of their classroom and said, I want the board to know, thank you for letting us be with students. I mean, they were excited, and I think we've seen that in the last couple weeks. We've received several emails from elementary teachers, which greatly appreciate. But the work that they have done this year to try to normalize the opportunities for kids, it's a lot of work. I mean, I talked with an elementary teacher, first grade teacher, and she said, just even making sure my kids have sharpened pencils. Like, you don't think about every week she collects a box of pencils, and then she cleans a box of pencils, and then she sharpens the box of pencils so she can hand them out on Monday for kids. Like, there's a lot of work that's going, on behind the scenes, and we've had been fortunate that some of these teachers in the last couple weeks have actually explained that to us, and I greatly appreciate it. But it was so good to see. We're also going to go, we're going to go to Wheaton, Warrenville South to see, as Rob mentioned, we're also going to go to Jefferson. So we're going to get that opportunity as well, and we'll be able to report back hopefully at the next.
One other thing is, we still do our teacher kind of connect, have our teacher groups we connect with, right? Mm-hmm. So I had mine since the last meeting, and one of my teachers actually said, and she's been in the district a long time, this is the best year she has ever had as a teacher. I was shocked by that statement. It was fantastic. Smile, it was genuine, it was awesome. So there's a lot of positive too.
Great.
Yep, just a couple of quick things. Winfield, Dr. Rich, who's superintendent of District 34, I think it's, in Winfield, we have 4 school districts, 93, 94, West Chicago High School, and then 200. So it's kind of interesting for the small little community. But Chris and I have been tag teaming these meetings they've been having for several months. I went Monday night, and just COVID and vaccinations was a big topic. A lot of grumbling about the way the county's communicating and so forth. So a lot of common ground there. And this group is all the school districts, the fire district, the park district, representation from the hospital. So it's, a few real specific Winfield things I won't get into. But then they also just talked about how we could support the community members and businesses. So, you know, and on the community side, a lot of talk about the Winfield Educational Foundation and the Student Excellence Foundation. I think we've been reaching out to them for the food pantry, so that's been good to get a little bit wider spread on that. And then the other thing is on the equity topic, I'm excited for the committee of the whole update on that. I'm part of the district's equity task force. We had a meeting. We've been meeting once a month. I got pretty interested in this as about a year ago, and really trying to figure out what I could do, and I couldn't come up with a lot. And the more I talk to people, I've talked to a lot of different people in the community just to get perspective and learn, because as a white male, we get a lot of criticism because of the way things are. So I'm trying to figure out what I can do differently, and I couldn't think of a lot a year ago, and it's becoming more and more apparent there are things things I can do individually and as a part of the school board. So I'm excited about about that and about the update we're going to see at the committee of the whole. Thanks.
Good.
Okay, the only other thing that I'd like to add, we're going to have on February 26th our first Community Engagement Committee meeting of the year, so that's exciting to look forward to and anticipate what community engagement could look like over the next year or so. A couple topics for future discussion, as Dave just mentioned, the district equity plan update, and then second, the learning loss mitigation plan. That'll be at our committee of the whole. And then I guess I just had one kind of request for Dr. Schuler. As you talk about the district equity plan, can we put a piece in there about we've heard some communications from our community about the State Board of Education's proposed teacher development program, and maybe some misunderstanding about what that is. If there's a way to put in a little information on that, just to be clear for the board, the differences, and maybe the community members that are hearing that as well, then they will grow some perspective or gain some perspective on what that really is being proposed down in Springfield. And announcements are, as I just mentioned, our next committee of the whole meeting will be on February 24th, here again at Hubble Middle School. And then one thing I wanted to add, that back at our January 13th meeting, we announced that the scheduled January 23rd chat with the board was being postponed. At the time, we were still within the state's Tier 3 mitigation, so we had limited capacity in the rooms. But now that we're back into Phase 4, we do anticipate we're going to reschedule that at some point early this spring. So we would want to get that opportunity for the board to hear from the community, and we're going to try to do that, time that properly so that we can have a meaningful conversation for the board as we think about the future and even in the next school year. The next regular meeting will be March 10th, again here at Hubble Middle School. I don't believe we have any public comments for in-person about non-agenda items, so with that, we do have one closed session. We do have closed session tonight following our meeting, so I have to read this whole thing, I know it's long. I move to adjourn a closed session for the purpose of discussing the appointment, employment, compensation, discipline, performance, or dismissal of specific employees, specific individuals who serve as independent contractors in a park, recreational or educational setting, or specific volunteers of the public body or legal counsel for the public body, including hearing testimony on a complaint lodged against an employee, a specific individual who serves as an independent contractor in a park, recreational or educational setting, or a volunteer of the public body, or against the legal counsel for the public body to determine its validity under 5 ILCS 120/2, subparagraph C, subparagraph 1, and collective negotiating matters between the public body and its employees or their representatives, or deliberations concerning salary schedules for one or more classes of employees under 5 ILCS 120/2, subparagraph C, subparagraph 2. Can I have a second?
Second.
seconded by Mrs. Crabtree. All in favor, say aye. No, I'm sorry, we have to do a roll call vote. Sorry, Mrs. Hutchison, would you please call a roll? Yes.
Yes?
Yes.
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 Okay, so we are adjourned to closed session. There will be no act. Thank you.